Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me from Israel. So I'll tell you, I had my cowboy hat on before, but my grandfather is like, look at that head of hair. How could you cover it? Yeah, he asked me if I could donate some to him. So the truth is, the story I'm about to tell you is actually a very personal story for me. At the beginning, it was very hard for me to share it. About a year ago today, I find myself in Kenya, Kenya, Nairobi, arrested for child trafficking, not knowing how or if or when I was going to get out. And it was not easy, it was not simple. Um, to rewind back, before I went on this mission, it was Hanukkah time, Hanukkah 2018. And I was hosting at my home a pastor from Atlanta, Pastor John Miller. And by us, the Hanukkah candles, the holiday of miracles, is when we do wishes. And I see my oldest daughter. I have 6 children. My oldest daughter at the time was 13, and she's crying by the Hanukkah candles. And I say, Naomi, why are you crying? And she said, I made a wish that Piat and Susie, these are the 2 girls that we were trying to get out of South Sudan, I made a wish that next year, Hanukkah, they'll be lighting Hanukkah candles with us. And I don't think it's ever going to happen. At the end of the Hanukkah meal that we had, Pastor John comes over to me with an envelope. And he says, I was in church in Atlanta, and I was telling them about my friend AY, who helps Ethiopian Jews come to Israel. And a woman after service came to me with this envelope and said, go to Israel and give this to your friend AY. And when he gave that money to me, I understood that I had no excuse, and it was the exact amount that I was missing that I needed to pay the smuggler to bring them out. And I said, Pastor John, but why are you doing this? Why is it so important to me? And he said, this isn't me. This is Isaiah. God told Isaiah 11:12, and he says he will raise a banner for the nations. He says, this is our job. This is my job as part of the nations. This is my duty. This is where we have to come in. He says that we'll raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the 4 corners of the earth. And this is my job. Now, just to go fast, rewind how this story started. I'm not going to go into all the details. There's also a lot of classified things that we can't speak. We have a short amount of time. I'm going to try to run through the story. This behind us is a picture that I took of the Ethiopian Jews. As you can see, they're crushing coffee beans over there. And this is how they look today. This is 2018 in Ethiopia. I'm going to just run through a little bit. Just to kind of give you a really fast history of the Ethiopian Jews. So as you can see, Ethiopia, the Jews in Ethiopia mostly lived in the north of Ethiopia. They've been there since the first temple. The first temple, the exile down to Egypt, as it says in the book of Jeremiah, they continued down the Nile till they got to Ethiopia. In the Ethiopian Jews, the way they lived is every time the birds would go north, they would tell the birds, say hi to Jerusalem. And when the birds would come back, they would run after the birds and they would try to touch them so they could touch something that stood on the grounds of Jerusalem. In 1977, what happened in Israel? 1977, Menachem Begin gets elected, and he brings the head of the Mossad and he tells them the famous words, Heviuli et Yudei Ethiopia. Bring me the Ethiopian Jews. And at the time, there's a big civil war in Ethiopia. It's illegal to leave. And the Ethiopian Jews started leaving, just as you could see here in the pictures, from the north of Ethiopia. They went all the way west to Sudan. They arrived at Sudan, where the Red Cross started building them camps. The Mossad came in and started finding the Ethiopian Jews. At the beginning, when they found them, the Ethiopians said, you guys aren't Jewish, you're white. They didn't even know that it existed such a thing, Jews that weren't dark. They took them out of the camps and they brought them to Port Sudan. In Port Sudan, having some technical difficulties again. In Port Sudan, come on. Hold on. In Port Sudan, anybody see the movie Red Sea Resort? So the Red Sea Resort, Port Sudan, the Mossad builds diving resorts where during the day they would dive, and at night they would. Oh, come on. At night they would take. Here we go. Let's see if this is gonna work. At night they would take Zodiac boats. There we go. Into international waters. Here we go. Port Sudan. Into international waters, onto the Bat Galim ship. The Bat Galim ship would go all the way up to Sharm el-Sheikh. Sharm el-Sheikh at the time is part of Israel, and they bring them to Israel. This actually is one of the trucks that they would drive overnight from the refugee camps, 2 nights, all the way to the Red Sea Resort. That's an actual picture of the Red Sea Resort and the family that ran the resort. This is the Bat Galim ship. This person who's standing is Zimna, one of the Ethiopian Mossad agents, and that's the Ethiopian Jews, 1977 up till 85, that come to Israel. Then all of a sudden you have Ethiopian Jews growing up in Israel. I hear this story. I hear about that there's still Ethiopian Jews in Israel, in Ethiopia, that want to come to Israel. And I said, I'll do my small little part to help bring Ethiopian Jews back to Israel, the return of the exiles. So I have a friend of mine, Ezri Tubi. Anybody heard of Ezri Tubi? Right? What does he do? He makes Hasbara videos all about Israel. And I say to him, listen, I have an idea. Took 5 days off of work. Let's go to Ethiopia. Let's make a really nice video and try to bring up awareness. That way it'll help bring the Ethiopian Jews back to Israel. We land in Ethiopia. What does a Jew do as soon as he gets to a foreign country? Finds a good money changer. I'm Jewish. I can make fun of Jews. It's okay. And then we go on to Addis Ababa, and we go into the synagogue. And as you could see, they pray there just the same way we pray in Israel. The same prayer shawls, the same books, the same prayers, exactly word for word. And then on the walls, I see that it has a list of the people that died waiting to go to Israel. I go on to Gondar, and I see this picture. And this picture is basically what changed the story for me. Now, I'm also a major in the IDF and reserves, and we learn in intelligence, and we learn to look for things that kind of don't match. And I was looking at this. This is in Gondar. And I see everybody there look Ethiopian. And there's one boy all the way to the left that he looks Sudanese, not Ethiopian. The skin color is much darker, much thicker features. And I go up to him and I ask, what's your story? What are you doing here? And what he told me basically changed everything. And he said that, just so you should know, Operation Moses, the first operation, where Jews walked through about 40 days through Ethiopia to Sudan. And then, as I explained to you, to Israel, 14,000 Jews made it to Israel. 4,000 died on the way. 4,000, which is a huge number, mostly from diseases. Some were kidnapped. Some were shot as they crossed the border. And then there was 88 people that went missing, just like the keys of the piano. And he tells me my mother, his mother, was on the way to Israel with her brothers. And her brothers arrived to Israel, and she never made it. And she's one of the 88 that went missing. And he brings me to his mother that's in the synagogue, and she doesn't speak English, only Arabic. And I speak to her in Arabic, and I understand it's a long story, so she invites me to coffee. Now, this is her home in Ethiopia, a mud hut, as you could see. In the home, a lot of people fit in. And as you could see, coffee. Now, coffee, if you ever get invited to coffee in Ethiopia, it's about a 3-hour process. You have to go out, they get the wood, they break it, they light the fire, they take the green beans, and they brew it on the open fire, and they crush it by hand, as you saw in the first picture. And they make coffee, and she starts telling me the whole story in Arabic from the beginning. And she says, I was a 14-year-old girl. And I'm walking through Ethiopia. We get to Sudan, and I'm waiting for the Mossad agents to come and take me to Israel. In the meantime, waited for about a year and a half, and there's a Sudanese soldier that came to her and tried to rape her. She was able to take the gun out of his hands and shoot him and kill him. She ended up in a Sudanese prison on death row. The head of the prison had a liking to her, paid money to the family, and married her. And then she shows me the picture of her children. And in the picture of her children, as you could see, She says the first daughter that was born, her name was Piat on the top left. Piat in the Dinka language. She was married to a Dinka man. It's the Dinka tribe of South Sudan. Piat means good. The second daughter, Susie. The third child, Riel, on the father, of course. The fourth son, Chol. That's the boy that you saw at the synagogue. And by the way, that was his first day in the synagogue. Now, how did they get to the synagogue? We're going to fast forward about 30 years later, which was when I showed up there. Their mother sees on TV Ethiopian Israelis visiting Ethiopia. And she said, hey, my brothers must have made it to Israel. And she goes to Ethiopia looking for them. And she finds some Ethiopian Israelis and she says, please take me with you to Israel. And they said, it doesn't work like that right now, it's not the 80s anymore. And she said, I'm Jewish, I need to come to Israel, let me come there. And they said, listen, what we'll do is like this. I showed her what a smartphone is, and they did a video of her, and they said, we're going to send it to groups. She had no idea how you do groups, what videos are on phones, how does that work, but she did it, and she said her story. Now imagine her brothers, 30 years later, were sitting together and get a video on their WhatsApp. Does anybody know this girl? She claims her brothers are in Israel. They open up the video, and it's their sister, over 30 years. And her sister has children. They contact her and they say, go to Ethiopia, to the Jewish community, and we'll start the bureaucracy to bring you to Israel. So she tells me this story. I'm getting the shivers. And then I'm looking around, looking at the kids, and I say, well, where are the two girls? And here she got up and she walked out. She couldn't talk anymore. And I looked at the brother and I said, what happened? And he said, it's the Dinka culture. And I said, what is the Dinka culture? And he said, in the Dinka culture, by the way, till today, when a girl reaches the age of 12, all the neighbors come, they have a big party, and whoever gives the most cows to the father is able to marry the girl. And he told me both of his sisters were married off. And I looked at him like, you're saying your sisters were sold? He said, no, they're not sold. The cows are given as thanks to the father. I said, well, if that's not selling, I don't know what is. And I said, so where are they? We could bring them. We don't leave anyone behind. We're all together. Their sisters are just like my sisters. I will do everything I can to bring them. He said, well, the truth is we've been disconnected. When the oldest sister, Piat, she was married off, and her husband took her to the south of South Sudan in a little village called Rimbek, and they had their first baby, a little baby girl, and they named her Ayen. Ayen is named after the first cow that was paid for the mother because they missed the cow. The mother, I guess, did not have the best conditions, if you know what I'm trying to hint to. So Piat takes her little baby and tries to travel back to her mother, to Gadaref. About a 30-day travel, no food, no money, basically hitchhiking, eating the scraps, leftover scraps in the market. Finally, she gets back to her mother. Now there's the uncle, the husband's uncle, Khal Suleiman. He knows the borders, he has connections. He finds out where she went. He tells the husband, he goes back, takes her out of her mother by force, brings her back to the village, throws her in prison. Ever since, they're disconnected. And he tells them, we don't know where they are, what's going on. And I said, I'll do whatever I can to save your sisters. I looked at the mother's face, not an ounce of hope. I myself didn't really believe that I would ever succeed in doing it, but I said, it's not up to me to succeed, it's up to me to try. And when I go to heaven, God won't come to me and say, why didn't you succeed? God will say, why didn't you try? So I said, all I have to do is try. What could I try? What could I do? I don't know. Experience in smuggling people out of countries. I never did that. I skipped that course in university. So I got the Chola smartphone, and I taught him about Facebook. And he started looking for his sister. Of course, he couldn't find her. She doesn't have a smartphone. In the meantime, I go back to Israel, and I'm in touch with him. 3 months go by. This is Chol, by the way. This is in Khartoum. And 3 months go by, and then he contacts me in Israel, and he says, hey, I found somebody that I went to school with, and he says he knows the older sister. She's living in Juba, and she has 3 children now. and she's living away from her husband, which means in South Sudan that the 3 children are living with the husband's family, his mother, his sisters, something like that. So, but he said, be very, very careful when you contact her, because if Uncle Suleiman finds out that she has any person from the West with money, they'll kidnap her and ask for ransom, and we'll never see her again. This guy used to come visit me every night in my nightmares. And we tried to figure out, I would start speaking to her every night, and she speaks in a South Sudanese Arabic. And I'm talking to her and trying to figure out, and I ask her to send me pictures. So she goes, she finds a friend who has a smartphone, and these are the pictures that start coming in. That's Fiat and Susie, 2 sisters. That's Fiat near her house in South Sudan. It's another picture. But this guy keeps on coming back. He keeps on coming back to visit, and we're trying to figure out, how do we get them out? How do we get them out? Now, I'm not going to go through all the lists of ways and trying, but just in case any of you try to send with Western Union money to South Sudan, you should know it doesn't work. I tried all other ways, and we talked to different Mossad agents. They told us all the don't do's. Don't go this way, don't go that way. If you show up there, it's game over. And we're trying to figure out what to do. Guys have any ideas? Did a lot of praying. Well, it's like this. Whenever you come to a situation, you have to know there's always a guy. Now, you got to find the guy. Now, the trick is you got to find the right guy. Because if you find the wrong guy, you end up in the wrong place. Now, you finally find the guy, and he's helping you, and you get stuck. He can't do it. Your guy will always know the next guy. So somebody told me about there's this guy, and this guy's name is Jacob, and he helps bring children from South Sudan to Uganda for schools. South Sudan, there's a lot of civil wars. The school situation is not the best over there, and this is what he does. That's his job. You know, everybody needs a job. As you said, there's the guy who fixes the air conditionings, and there's the guy who takes people from South Sudan to Uganda. So, you know, I start talking to him, and he says, yeah, no problem, this could do it, but the guy doesn't take credit cards. And that's where Pastor John came in. And he brought me that envelope. I flew down to Uganda, in Tebe. I meet him. I see he's the good guy. He's the type of guy we want to work with. We pick a date, December 25th, 2018. Why December 25th? A lot of parties going on. Nobody will realize a couple girls and their children crossing the border. This is Uganda. It is super, super hot, humid. The areas over there, malaria is 80, 90%. And we're waiting at the border between South Sudan and Uganda. It's 11 at night, 12 at night, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. We haven't spoken to them in 18 hours. We don't know, did they make the bus, did they not make the bus? Buses are coming in, going out. People are coming off. Basically, it was like 2:30. We basically said, you know what? Maybe they didn't make the bus. And he says, no, my guy told me he saw them go on the bus. Maybe they were followed. Maybe they were taken. Maybe they got stuck in the border. Every option comes into our head. All of a sudden, 2:30, the girls come off the bus. At that moment, I felt just like the Exodus. On one hand, and on the other hand, mixed feelings. I realized that we failed because, as you can see, they're without their children. Each sister has 3 children, and they came out just with one of them with a baby. This is a picture at the bus stop, and we tried to figure out what to do. In the meantime, we're taking care of them. We showed them what a restaurant is. Just so you guys can get the vibe, this is the brother who speaks English. He sends me this video. And just so you can understand and get the feeling, let's see if the sound's going to work.
Good morning, Brother Haron. How are you doing, man? So, I'm really happy today. I don't know what child can I say to you or what can I do for you, man. I'm really happy, bro. You will never forget you in our life. In our lifetime, we will never forget you. Thanks you, and 1,000 thanks you, Lord. You did a story like Moses when he took Jews from Egypt to Israel. So it is really an amazing story. We will never forget that. It is stuck in my mind now. Even yesterday, we will never sleep until morning. We just think.
So the mother also sent a video, and she was speaking to them in Arabic. And while she was speaking, the girls were speaking back. And I had to explain to them, no, it doesn't work like that. It's not a live video. You have to wait, and we can try to send back. Obviously, it's not a reception to do a live video. So here we're trying to figure out, and I said we don't leave anybody behind, and we have to get the kids out. So the younger sister said, "Oh, no problem. Send money to the uncles where the kids are, and they'll give them the kids." We send money. The guys take the money and disappear. So then we try to work with the older sister. Jacob says, "I have an idea." He calls the husband and he says, "Listen, your children are able to get free education in Uganda." Now, in South Sudan, that's like winning the lottery. He was so happy. But what do you do when you get such great news? You want to double check it. How do you double check it? The father goes to the local Dinka witch. And he tells the local Dinka witch the story. The Dinka witch does her thing and says, "Listen, the mother of the children's family is trying to steal the kids. Don't send them." Since then, he doesn't answer the phone. We try. About a week passes. We realize that the kids aren't coming out. In the meantime, let's send the girls to their mother in Ethiopia. Now, it's not so simple to travel, especially if you don't have passports. So just so you could see, we go from South Sudan down to Kampala, the capital of Uganda. Kampala, we go to the border, cross over to Kenya. Kenya to Nairobi. Nairobi, we go up to Namole, the border of Ethiopia. Ethiopia, we go up to Addis Ababa. Addis Ababa, 2-day travel to Gondar. Gondar, we meet the mother. 8 days, a couple thieves, a bag was stolen, they disappeared, a couple things happened. So just this travel is a whole book, another time. At that getting together, though, imagine a mother not seeing her daughters for over 10 years, not knowing if they're alive, not knowing what's going on with them. You can't imagine the feeling of emotions when that happened. That's the brother that met her also. That's in Gondar. Now, when that happened, I felt like it was worth it to live just for that moment. I remember my rabbi always told me that the feeling when you bring a person back to the Almighty, back to His Creator, the feeling in the heavens is just like, imagine if you bring a child back to their mother and reunite them. And here I did too. For me, I said I did it. And I remember I sat down at my boss's office and I showed him this video. And he looked at me and he said like this. I was like, "What?" He said, "No, you're not done. You still have the kids." I was like, "Okay, listen, the kids is more complicated. It'll take time." He said, "Nope, we don't leave anyone behind. Don't even be happy. Don't rest till you bring those children." I said, "Okay." So I call up Jacob, and we're working on it, and time is passing. And they're in Ethiopia with their mother waiting. In the meantime, the younger sister realizes nothing's happening. She goes. We don't even know where she goes. The older sister also starts getting frustrated. I call up Jacob, my guy, and I say, "Listen, Jacob, if those children cross over to Uganda, on the spot, I give you $1,000. Now, you have to understand, South Sudan, a government worker makes $21 a month. So $1,000 goes very far over there." So he says, "You know what? Let me try something." He decides to call the father. What he didn't know, 5 minutes before he called the father got a different phone call. And this was from his mother. His mother called him and said, "Come back to Juba and bury your 2 children." Sorry, one child. One child. You have 2 children left. Come bury your little daughter, your 5-year-old girl. And he said, "What do you mean? What happened to her?" And he said, "Your 5-year-old girl, she was outside playing in the sun. It was a very hot day, and she just collapsed. We took her, we put her in the bed, and she never got out of bed." And he hung up the phone, and he was thinking about his 5-year-old girl that just passed away. And then his phone rang, and he was sure it was the mother again. And he answers the phone, and it was Jacob. And Jacob said, "Why let your children die in South Sudan when they could live in Uganda?" And at that moment, the father said, "Even though the Dinka witch told me something, but at the end of the day, I'm a Christian. And if God chose my children to live, who am I to say no?" I had to call the mother and let her know that she's never going to see her 5-year-old baby anymore. But I promised her and said, don't worry, I will do everything, and I will bring your 2 children to you in your hands and bring you to Israel. And she was obviously broken and crying, and she says, I don't know how this could be. And then she said, Bas inshallah Rabban Israel yasadna. God willing, the Almighty of Israel will help us and wasalna l'Israel b'salam, and bring us to Israel in peace. A couple of days pass. I'm Shomer Shabbat. I don't use the phone or car on Shabbat. Also where I live, there's no driving. On Friday night, I get a message. I look, it's Jacob. It's life and death. I call Jacob. I said, what's the story? He says, I have indication. Tomorrow, Shabbat, they're going to cross the border with the kids. Shabbat morning, I get in a car. I drive to the airport, land in Entebbe, Uganda. By the way, this is me, Operation Left Behind number 2. Now, well, see, Jacob told me that I had to blend in. I'm pretty sure he was making money on the side, and he had a bet with somebody. It's like, I bet you I could get that white guy to put dreads on. I don't know. But that's me driving through Uganda. We met the kids, and I get the 2 kids, and I say, Jacob, this is 1 traveling document and 2 children. And Jacob's like, Aaron, you didn't look at the document. Look at the bottom where it says luggage. It says plus 1 child. Now, it's good you guys are laughing because you guys are over here in Florida feeling really safe. I'm in Uganda, and I just received 2 children, 7 and 10 years old, and 1 document, and plus 1 child. And I'm like, Jacob, you're right, I skipped the course of the child trafficking thing, but I just don't think that'll work. And Jacob looks at me and he says, listen, when in Africa, you travel 2 kids in 1 document. That's what you do here. And then he says, and look, this is how we were able to pass from South Sudan to Uganda. It worked. I'm like, that's a good point. So I take the 2 children. Our plan is to do the same thing. Remember this way, all the way to Addis Ababa. I was supposed to drop them off at their mother. By Shabbat, be home in Israel. And I knew I did my part. And from there, they'll have to figure it out. There's only so much I could do. I get the kids. I actually brought them, that's me with the kids in Uganda. I actually brought them candy. Now, I didn't know that the story of Hansel and Gretel actually exists in South Sudan. They've never, ever seen a white person before. They were sure I was a witch. They wouldn't take the candy. They were afraid I was fattening them to eat them. Now, as you could see, the camera, the phone, did it itself. They've never seen a smartphone, and you could look at their faces, how fascinated they were when they see how themselves in the phone. So that worked itself. Afterward, they kept on touching me. They thought my skin was painted. They couldn't figure out why it was so white. We go on the bus. Now, this is a bus like you've never seen before. It's pretty tough, this bus. Very small. This is actually after we crossed the border from Uganda to Kenya. It worked. We're in the bus, and it's like 18-hour bus rides, really narrow roads. You're on the wrong side of the road. Every time another car comes, you go onto the side. And you think Florida traffic is bad. Saba, you think Sarasota traffic is bad in the winter? You should see this traffic. Here, the traffic isn't just the cars and the cows that are crossing, but every town you go through, you're surrounded by people sticking in these skewers trying to sell you roasted bananas. I didn't even know you could roast those things. And they're trying to sell you, and they don't let you go till you buy them from the window. We finally get through. We're on our way. We stay at a hotel. At the hotel, we go through breakfast, and the girl comes in pointing like this, like she's pointing at some ice cream sundae she's never seen before. And you know what she was pointing at? She's pointing at an orange. And I asked, what, you've never seen that before? And she says, I've seen it, but I've never tasted it. Am I allowed to taste it? And I said, sure. And I show her how to peel it. She's looking at it. She did a little nibble, and then she threw it down. She didn't like the texture. It was very weird for her. We ate other food. It was mostly bread and some beans that they were used to eating. And then we go on, and we're on our way. Now, I'll tell you, if you guys ever take children through Africa, the trick is, giving you a tip here, stay with the ground borders. As long as you don't go into the airport, you'll be okay. I was looking for the shortcut, and I didn't go through this course. So I went into the airport, and we're supposed to take a small little plane to get closer to the border. and shorten our time. And over there, we actually went through security, we went through immigrations, and we're waiting for the little plane to come get us. And then one of the immigrations officer comes and calls me over and asked to see my documents again. And I showed him the one document, and he said, no, this doesn't work over here. And then we're getting more and more trouble. And then he puts me in the detention room, and he says, listen, child trafficking is a minimum of 20 years. And you have 2 children. I said, okay, I'm an American citizen. I want to see my lawyer. And he's like, sure. You have, by the Kenya law, 4 months to meet your lawyer. This is where things started getting rough. And I'm trying to think what to do. In the meantime, I decide I'm at least going to let the mother know that I took the children. I send her a picture just to give her hope. This is the picture that she got. The first time she realized, actually, she hasn't seen her children in a really long time. And she's able to see a picture of them. This is the picture she sends back. She's with her sisters. I even send her a picture with them next to the little plane. First time, of course, they've seen a plane before. And but things are getting rough. They're asking me questions. They're investigating me. And before they take my phone, I send to all my friends in Israel, David Avery, if you guys know. He has a lot of connections with Africa, Israel. And I said, anybody has any connections in Kenya, now's the time. Take away my phone. It's already late at night. It doesn't look like it's getting any better. And I hear them speaking. They're trying to figure out what to do with the children. It's complicated. What's going to happen? We can't take the children away because they're minors. What should we do with him? They're with him. All of a sudden, I see outside the room some guy, looks like a politician, with a Kenya cloak, a pin, and he's speaking. And what he does is he signs 1 million Kenya shillings and gives an ID and releases me. And I come out, and it's Pastor Dennis, and I say, trying to figure out, and he says he's friends with David Avery. And I say, Pastor Dennis, you don't know me. How did you just come here and do this? And he says, it says in the Bible that whoever blesses the Jews will be blessed. And you are a Jew going to Judea. And it's, for me, an honor to be part of bringing a Jew or a couple Jews to Judea. And this is my duty as a real Christian. Pastor Dennis stayed with me for a couple weeks in Kenya and didn't leave me alone till I was on the way. We continued. Having more technical difficulties. Come on. We continued. Why is this happening? Imagine the technicalities now. Imagine over there in Africa when everything is going wrong. So here, I bring them to dinner, and they said, why do we need to eat dinner? We ate breakfast already. They're used to eating 1 meal a day. But here, at least the first time ever, I made them use forks. You could tell their excitement with the forks. In the evening, she took a shower, and she washed her dress and hung it. Because they're used to, as soon as they have water, you wash your dress. You don't know when the next time you're going to have water. The next day, my plan was I'll take them to the Israeli embassy, right? The Israeli embassy. Before I took them to the Israeli embassy, I said I'm going to do a little bit of a fixer-upper. So I brought them to the shoe store. I picked them some shoes. Then I got them some new clothes. And then, you guys recognize them? I thought I'd be a little bit safer walking to the Israeli embassy with them looking like that. And then the oldest girl looked at me and she said, Inta, you. Like, I also need a fixer-upper. I'm like, okay. So I'll do a fixer-upper too. Now, we run to the Israeli embassy. It was very complicated getting in without a passport. Finally, we got in. We go to the consul general, and you're speaking behind like a bulletproof glass, and she's pointing to like the phone thing, and you pick it up, and you say, and I tell them the fastest story, and imagining the helicopter coming, the rope ladder going down, us getting on the ladder, going to Israel. That did not happen. She looks at me, and she's like, you're in trouble here. This could be international law you're breaking. And I was like, what do you mean? They're Jewish. Their mother's Jewish. Law of return. let's bring them to Israel. She's like, it's a little complicated. It doesn't work like that. I'm sorry, we can't help you. And then the security guard comes and opens the door and says, your time is done here. And I'm like, listen, it's really hot outside. Let me enjoy the air conditioning. Let me just figure out what my next steps are. And he says, this is not a waiting room. Please leave. And I go outside and I contact my Israeli contact that's been helping me the whole time. And this is what he writes to me. Sounds to me that you could end up getting yourself thrown into jail for kidnapping, a charge possibly exacerbated by illegally transporting children across borders. I am unable and unwilling to give you any direction. This is my guy in Israel. Now, we have to keep on going to immigrations. Immigrations is slowly catching up with us. The whole time I'm with Pastor Dennis, he's taking me here, taking me there, and things are getting worse and worse. We're not really getting anywhere. Time is passing. The hole is closing down on us. Then, the whole time I'm in touch with my family. My wife stops answering the messages. And I remember asking my older daughters, it's my first time saying this story with my family member here. And my daughters, I was like, why is mommy not answering me? And they're like, mommy's very upset at you. And I get an email from my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law never emails me. And she says, you better get back home before you're not going to have a home to get to. And I say, I remember I have the email, I wrote back to her, I said, she told me, go back home because you have to take care of your children. You have children, they need a father. And I wrote back to her and I said, right now, I'm taking care of God's children. And when you're taking care of God's children, God will take care of your children. And right now, there's not anybody in the world that'll take care of these children. And the biggest thing that I could do for my children is to teach them the importance of helping another person. Even if that person has a different color skin, speaks a different language, lives in a different country. That's the biggest thing I could do for my children. Somebody calls me up from work, it's like my guy in work, and he says, if you don't come back soon, you're not going to have a job to come back to. At that moment, I made a decision. I said, it doesn't matter what the consequences is. I will do everything till the better end to bring these children back. Whatever consequences is, I accept. And we're trying and trying. And then Pastor Dennis comes up with an idea and he says, listen, I got a guy. I said, okay, where's your guy? And he says, well, I got a guy in the South Sudanese embassy. I was like, it might be better to stay out of there. And he says, no, this guy will help me. So I text message David Avery. He's the one who connected me. And I said, do you count on Pastor Dennis 100%? And he writes back to me, 101%. Pastor Dennis is a Christian who loves the Jewish people. And for all the money in the world, he won't turn his back on you. So I didn't have a choice. I go with him to the South Sudanese embassy. I meet his guy. After about 5 minutes, his guy is like, this is way above my payroll. We meet the consul general. A couple minutes later, we're walking down the hallway, and we're in the ambassador's office, the ambassador of South Sudan in Kenya, which is the biggest ambassador of South Sudan. That's where they run the country from. If I didn't know why the country was so poor until then, I understood now that all the riches of the country is in this guy's office. We sit down on the couch. Across from me is the ambassador. To the left of me is Pastor Dennis. All the high embassy workers are standing around. This thing doesn't happen every day. And the ambassador calls the children and starts speaking to them in the Dinka language. The only people who speak Dinka is the Dinka tribe in South Sudan. And I'm telling him, listen, I'm bringing these children to their mother who's waiting in Ethiopia. They're going to give them free school. That's our organization, what we do. And he's speaking to them in Dinka, and he knows exactly what's going on. In South Sudan, women don't have rights. I'm taking these children to their mother in Ethiopia. It's a big red light. And he looks at me. And he says, under international law, you're in South Sudan. And these children are not leaving South Sudan. And you are arrested in the name of South Sudan. At that moment, in my mind, I couldn't see anything. All I saw was checkmate. I failed. And I remember at that moment, I was so angry, and I was angry at God. And I said, God, these are not my children. These are your children. And you are the one who promised to Isaiah, אמור לצפון תני, ולתימן אל תכלי, הביא בנייך מרחוק ובנותייך מקצה הארץ. I will tell to the north, let them go, and to the south, do not hold them back. I will bring my sons from afar, and my daughters from the ends of the earth. And I'm looking at the children, and I'm speaking to myself, to God, and I'm saying, God, these are your children, not mine. And if you don't want them, that's not my problem. As I was thinking that, Pastor Dennis, he speaks a little bit more diplomacy, and he starts speaking, and he says, Your Excellency. Now, I learned later that's how you're supposed to really speak to an ambassador. In Israel, we speak to them, we address ambassadors as achi, means bro. That's how we do in Israel. Maybe that's what was wrong, I don't know. And he says, Your Excellency, the reason why these children could travel to Israel. Now, as soon as he says the word Israel, I was like, no, you don't do that. Growing up is always like Israel's like traveling the world. You're supposed to kind of like hide that part. A lot of people are anti-Israel. We're in enough trouble, so we don't need to bring out the anti-Semite card. But Pastor Dennis isn't aware of that. And he says, the reason why these children are able to arrive to Israel is because they have Jewish roots. I see you're laughing. He actually talks like that. I'm going to show you a video soon, him speaking like that. It's because they have Jewish roots. Their mother is from the Ethiopian Jewish descendants, and they were stuck here in Sudan on the way to Israel. The ambassador looks at him, and he gets angry. And he says, Why are you telling that to me? You think I don't know? And he points on his table, is a Bible. And he says, You think I do not read the prophecies? You cannot make this up. It is written in the book. The Jewish people are returning to their land. And we know the history of the Ethiopian Jews that got stuck in my country. My question is, why just these two kids and not the other families? We know who they are. It's not a secret. And I was like, listen, we'll take care of these two kids. Afterwards, we'll deal with the other families, okay? And then he brings me over and he shows me books written. One is Shimon Peres and other Israeli leaders. And he says, the Dinka tribe from the 60s had battles with the Sudanese Arabs. And we would fight with bow and arrows till the only country in the world that was willing to sell us guns was Israel. And we remember that for them, how Israel helped us when no one else would. He didn't know we were just trying to make a buck on the side. But so he remembered that. And then we walked away and he said, Shalom. He sent his assistant to the hotel just to make sure that everything is real and legit. This, by the way, is on the roof of the hotel. When Ayen saw the water, she bent down and started drinking it. Then she spit it out and said, Why is it so salty? And then this is immigrations. We go on forward to the immigrations. Now, I'm going to just run through the details because we're short on time. But basically, South Sudan was okay. Immigration said like this, listen, we'll let you take the kids on one condition, if the father comes here personally and signs that you could take the kids. Now, we said, okay. We walked out. I told Pastor Dennis, no way, I'm not doing this. And he looked at me, and he said something that reminded me of my old Torah study days when I was a child. And he says, if you could not do this, would God put this upon you? And I said, okay, I guess I must be able to do it somehow. He takes me, we're on the way, we call the father, it was the whole thing. We bought him a ticket. He's now on the way to Kenya. This is just a video. Now I'm going to show you the video for two reasons. One, because you were laughing, so I want to show you that he really talks like that. The second, I want you to get a feel of the vibe of what was going on. Now, we're cracking a lot of jokes. When you're in very tense situations, you kind of try to break the tensity with jokes to kind of keep yourself insane.
Yes. Hey. How you doing? How you doing? We're here with
Deep in the
my
slums.
man, deep in the slums of Nairobi,
Oh yeah, don't get deeper
with
than this.
my man,
How you
Aaron.
doing? Look at that. At the slums, man.
Yeah, you know that's where we're at. So, but Aaron is heavily protected.
Oh yeah.
There's heavy security around here.
Heavy.
But
Heavy. That's why he
no,
doesn't
no,
go
no,
on the
no, no,
diet,
no,
because he wants to be heavy in
It's
security.
absolutely heavy. It's absolutely heavy. So, hey, we're having some good time in Nairobi. Really, lots of running
So much
around
fun.
and all that.
Let me stay here forever. So much fun. Why go back home? Almost sat in jail for child trafficking today, but besides that, everything's fine.
Hey, my goodness, it's been a tough
It doesn't
day,
get better than this, you know? It doesn't get better.
It's
We're
been a
peaking
tough
right
day,
now.
but
We are peaking.
we say that the grace of God is sufficient.
Amen.
By all means. So,
Amen.
hey, we're heading to the airport.
Okay, so as you can see, this is the airport. We took the father. We show him around. We kind of let him feel what this world could be like. That's, by the way, the father wearing the tefillah. We brought him some nice clothes. We got him a smartphone. We got him a bunch of things. Now, remember this guy on the right of the father. That is Pastor Firmo. Remember him. Pastor Firmo is a pastor in Juba, the capital of South Sudan, their hometown. He happens by chance, there's no chance in the world, to be in Kenya. For about a week, there's a big event, and he came there. And he comes to the breakfast, and he gives them a big blessing. The children are going to the Holy Land. Now he knows. And they're chosen, and everything's good. And he gives them a blessing. And that's it. We continue. We go to immigrations. I'm not going to go through the whole details. It was, we almost got stuck over there. We somehow got through there. After immigrations, we continue to the South Sudanese embassy. That's that picture. They knock on the table. They decide he's the father after 20 minutes of questions. And then we go to the Israeli embassy. The Israeli embassy, they look at us. In the meantime, my guys in Israel are waking up. They're helping me out. And they say, you know what? The kids could come to Israel if. And they give me a long list. And they start off with a list. The children need original birth certificates. Now, I tell them, listen, in South Sudan, 90% of the population don't have birth certificates. And they said, exactly. And that is why on the original birth certificate, we're going to need to be stamped and signed by the Minister of Foreign Affairs himself to know that they're real. And they're going to need passports, and father's going to need ID, mother's going to need ID. All the names have to match. If you have all of that, no problem. You could take them to Israel. We tried. I remember that night I cried and cried. I didn't really think it was going to happen. I didn't want to let go of the kids. I realized there's no other way. I give the father an envelope of $500. I send him to South Sudan. I continue to Ethiopia. There, as you can see, I met their mother and now the grandmother. Of course, we drink coffee because that's what we do. Over here, anybody here eat injera? I don't advise. We're eating injera over here. And injera, it's the Ethiopian food. And then we had some technical difficulties. I don't know what's going on with this thing. And then I said, God, please make it work. And then what's happening basically is it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and the father's supposed to be getting the birth certificates and nothing's happening. And I'm calling. Every day he's answering me. Sometimes he doesn't, sometimes he does. And he keeps on saying, listen, there's technical difficulties. It was raining. The internet was down. It wasn't working. And every time he brings a different excuse. Why? He still doesn't have the documents. I understand. Again, I failed. I text my children. I said, I'm going to be home for Shabbat. They said, what about the kids? I said, we didn't do it. I failed. And I remember standing there over Gundar, looking at Gundar, screaming and saying, you know, I messed up. And I remember I sat down just like this. I put my head between my knees, and I realized I failed. And while my head was between my knees, I thought about it, and I said, God never gave up on me. And if God never gave up on me, how could I give up on the kids? But what's the next step? What could I do? There's nothing. What could I do? What else? I tried everything. And then they would start making fun of me. You gave him $500. Of course he's not going to come back. He's living there like a king now. Any ideas? What could I do? Did a lot of praying. We say God hears every single prayer. And he answers every single prayer. Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes it's no. And sometimes there's no chance. What can I do? Come on, any ideas here? Come on. Okay. You're going to pass the course? What guy? Pastor Firmo? Who said that? You passed the course. You get 100. You're coming with me on the next mission. So, kind of like when you have to call somebody, but like you don't want to call them, but you have to do it. So you let the phone ring one time, and then you hang up. Oh, I called you. Didn't answer. What could I do? So I said, you know what? I have to just do what I have to do. Call him, and then I could say, see, God, I even called Pastor Firmo, and that didn't either work. The problem is he answered his phone. And I said, Pastor Firmo, Passover is coming up. Passover, the Jews left Egypt. Right now, we have 2 Jews in South Sudan, and we need to bring them to Israel. I split the sea already. Israel is willing to take them. We're missing one thing. We're missing Moses. And you have to be that Moses. Pastor Firmo says, well, actually, I know a guy in foreign affairs. And I said, okay. He calls up the father first. He goes, he meets the father. He sends me this picture. And then he goes to foreign affairs. And on that same day, this is how powerful it is there. I told you, you got to know a guy. He sends me a picture of a birth certificate. And it's signed. Stamped and signed. Passport. Everything is online. Thursday, he's on the way to the airport. And then he texts me and he says, wait, if they don't have money for the visas, when they land in Ethiopia, Ethiopia's going to send them back. And I said, there's no way for me to wire money on the spot. And then he says, remember that $200 you gave me? And he gives him the $200 for the visas. They get on the plane, they take off, and then I write to him, listen, you've done so much for me. Tell me, please, what could I do to thank you? And this is what he writes to me. And he writes back, he wants one thing. Thank you so very much. Before anything, I just want you to bless me in the name of God, your forefathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's all he wants. And believe me, that man is very blessed. We get on a plane from Gondar, and we're flying now to Addis Ababa. The plan is to meet them in Addis Ababa. The plan is to meet them in Addis Ababa. I think I'm just going to restart my computer. We're planning to meet them in Addis Ababa. We land there, they land there, we go to the airport, and I tell the mother, I said, listen, the father of your children, he might have done some bad things to you, but if he doesn't sign on letting the children going to Israel, there's no way for them to come. So you have to try to smile, try to be nice, because international law, you need both parents. When he arrived, she wasn't even able to look at him in the face. Now, the stories that I heard of what he did to her, so when I spent time with him, he told me those stories in even more depth and details. And in South Sudan, it's not always something that you're embarrassed of. And I had to sit there with him and smile and say, wow, that's amazing. We need you to come to our country and teach us how to do these things. And that's how I really became friends with him. And at the end of the day, he said, listen, I'm letting the kids go, but they have to be with you. I'm trusting you with my children to take them to Israel. So we get to the embassy. the Israeli embassy. We show up with the documents. We show up with the passports. We show up with everything. And the consul general, the ambassador, looks at them and says, there's a problem. I said, you can't change the rules in the middle. I'm here with the father. I'm here with the mother. They already had a fight. I don't know how long they're going to last. Please, if there's a small technical thing. At that time, at that week, Israel just took out an Iranian scientist out of Iran. And I told them, come on, if you guys could do that, you should be able to take them out. And they said, listen, it's international law. There's no games. This is how it works. Sorry. Because you're in Ethiopia, you need Ethiopian immigrations to sign on the document. Now, it's Thursday evening. I really want to be home for Shabbat. I said, okay, listen, where's the Ethiopian immigrations? They said, it's closed now. Go tomorrow morning, Friday morning. I show up at half an hour before, and I send the ambassador this picture. And I said, this is outside. How am I supposed to get in there? And he says, I told you, it'll take some time. You're in Africa time right now. So remember the situation. What do? You look for the guy. You guys can recognize the guy. You see him over there. We pay the entrance fee. I go upstairs to the 3rd floor, and this is the picture I sent. Now here, people don't even have a number. They're just kind of waiting there, pushing around. And I send this picture, and I said, listen, there's no way to get in. I need to get to that room over there. And the ambassador says it'll take some time. Now, do you guys recognize the guy? See him standing up with the white suit? So I go to the guy, and I say, I'm working with the Israeli embassy, and we need to get these papers stamped. He takes me into the room. He looks at the papers, and he says, well, there's a problem. I said, what's the problem? It's Friday afternoon. The Israeli embassy is going to close soon, and they're not going to reopen until Monday because they're closed Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday. I just need to stamp them. He says, well, for us to stamp them, we need the ambassador of South Sudan and Ethiopia to stamp on them. And I said, but I have the foreign affairs minister himself. He said, right, but we work with the embassies. There's nobody to talk to. I go downstairs. I take a cab, an hour across the town. I get to the embassy of South Sudan, and I say, where's the ambassador? And he says, he's not in. When is he coming in? I don't know. Is he going to come in? Maybe. Could you speak to him? No, we don't do that. So I'm waiting. I find the right guy. He gets it stamped. I go back to the immigrations. I say, look, I got the minister stamp and the stamp from the embassy, the square stamp. He looks at it, and he's like, there's a problem. I was like, what do you mean? How could there be a problem? And he says, well, we need the circle stamp, and you just got the square stamp. And I said, you didn't say the circle stamp or the square stamp. You just said the stamp. And he said, sorry, these are the rules. We can't bend them. This is how it works. There's nobody to talk to. I get back in the car. I call the Israel ambassador to South Sudan. He calls the ambassador. He brings them to the embassy. I go there. I talk to him. I show him the document. And he's about to stamp. His advisor comes in and takes away the stamp from his hand. And I said, almost did it. Come on. You can do it. And he's like, the square stamp is for authenticizing papers. The circle stamp is for personal letters. This isn't a personal letter. And the ambassador says, we know that, but we need to help these children get to Israel. And then the advisor says, we must not bow down to the Ethiopian government. We are our own government. And he said, but, it's a one-time thing, He says, listen, next week we will talk to them. I was like, please, I don't know how much longer we're going to last. We need to bring these children home. And they start going back and forth. And at the end of the day, the ambassador says, listen, it is important to bring these children of Israel back to their homeland, the Jews to Judea. He takes the stamp from the advisor, and he stamps the circle stamp. And I say, I want one more thing. I want a picture with you. And this is the picture of me and the ambassador. As you can see in the back, the guy with the cowboy hat, that's actually the president of South Sudan. And I'm still in touch with him till today. I go back in the cab, cross the town, run to the immigrations, and lunch break. Now, it's about 1 o'clock. The Israeli embassy closes at 1. I call the ambassador. I says, please, I'm trying here. He says, we have a lot of security, and it's going to cost us a lot of money to keep the place open. And I said, I don't know how long I'll be able to keep them and try to stall. He calls the immigrations guy. The guy comes here, and he's like, what type of country is this? Takes me out of my lunch break to help these 2 kids? This never happens. He comes, he stamps. We go to the Israel embassy. And as you can see, we have the Ethiopian stamp and the Israeli and the visas. That's how I felt, but I didn't know what was waiting. Now, Shabbat comes in. The messenger comes from the Jewish agency, and he gives me the papers of the mother. And says the mother is now able to make aliyah on the law of return. And she gives me her Israeli papers. Her flight is Sunday afternoon. We keep the father very far away from her and very busy. And Saturday night, I look at her papers and I look at his papers and my heart falls. And I realize if I haven't been in trouble until now, I'm in much more trouble. I look at her papers and it says, completely different names than her real identity. It says, instead of Piat Mokorel, it says Tevia Safe. Instead of born in South Sudan, born in Ethiopia. Different father's name, different mother's name, different place of birth, different date of birth, different everything. And it does not match at all. Her family was embarrassed of her South Sudanese background, and they decided, oh, it's a small thing, let's just change her identity. But what happens is, Israel looks at it as somebody's trying to sneak children in. They're not really her kids. And I call my guy, and this is where I run out of guys. And he says, whatever you do, this is my guy telling me from inside, do not show up with them at the airport. Because then even Israel won't help you because they're going to think that you're lying to them. I'm out of guys. I don't know what to do. The whole night, obviously, I didn't sleep. Sunday morning, we made a decision and we understood that our goal is to help these children. And to help the children, if the mother arrives to Israel, becomes Israeli, eventually she could change her name and come back and bring her children. So we go to the airport, I give her her papers, I teach her to pronounce her new Ethiopian name, and I say, today you are landing in Israel, in the Holy Land. And I said, remember we were in Gondar and they were making matzahs in the Jewish community. And you asked, what's that funny bread they're making? I explained to you that when the Jewish people left Egypt, they were making bread and didn't have time to rise because even though for a whole year there were plague after plague after plague and people lost faith and they said, it's not happening. Just on our life, things happen and it's bad and we're trying and every turn there's another stumbling block and it doesn't work and it doesn't work and you want to give up and you want to give up. But when that time comes, it's so fast, it's not even time for the bread to rise. And I looked at her and I said, now's that time. You're landing in Israel today. And my friend will pick you up at the airport. And she looks at me and she looks at the kids and she says, what about my kids? Took a deep breath and I said, listen, Piat, your kids will never leave my side. We might land today. We might come next week. We might come in a month. But I promise you, eventually we'll come. But now you have to go. She looked at me, she says, I don't understand what you're planning. I don't understand what you're saying. But I never thought I'd get this far. And I only got this far because of you. And she went through the gate. 45 minutes later, she calls me. She says, I'm at gate 32. I'm waiting for the plane, to board the plane. And I said, if you haven't prayed now, pray till now, pray now. And she tells me, I'm going to pray to the God of Israel that will help us. I take the children, I go into the airport, and I'm looking for like the youngest guy with like the least experience. And I find him. And I go to him and I'm like, yeah, what's up? How you doing? You know? And while he's processing the tickets, his computer crashes. And then he points to the oldest guy in the room. You got to go to him. And I was like, nah, I'm not in a hurry. Like, you never hear that at an airport, you know? And he's like, no, I'm sorry, it'll take time. You got to go to him. I go to him, and he's having printing trouble. Every time he prints the ticket, it doesn't work. So I guess he was so busy with that, he didn't think. He tells me to go to the window across, and this is actually the original ticket that came out. Even that printer wasn't so good. We got the ticket, and he let us go. We go through security, and then I'm waiting in line, and I'm looking at passport control. Now, passport control, the guys there, their job is to make sure that people like us don't go through. And as my guy inside told me, that Ethiopia is cracking down on anything that looks like child trafficking, because they're trying to get money from the World Bank, and they have to show that they're cracking down on it. And every verse that I know in the Bible and Psalms is going through my head. And I'm telling to God again, I will tell to the north, let them go, and to the south, do not hold them back. I'll bring my sons from afar, and my daughters from the ends of the earth. I'll gather the exile of Israel from the four corners of the world. And we're standing up, and we go, and we're standing in front of the passport control. And I felt like it was the day of judgment, like Rosh Hashanah. And I'm either going to be written in the book of life or the book of no return. And I'm standing there, and I really felt like, it's like the day of judgment. And here he goes. It's in his hand to do one way and in his hand to the other way. And I give him the passports, and he's looking at them, and he stands up, and he overlooks the booth, and he says, "Are these your children?" And I didn't even prepare an answer. I didn't even know what I was going to say. And he's looking in suspicion, trying to figure out what this interesting situation in front of him is. And all of a sudden, I felt myself holding my Israeli pin. And I said, "These are Israel's children, and they sent me here to bring them home." And he sits back down, and he says, "Is there anything I could do to be part of this great nation that they send people around the world to bring their children home?" And as he says that, I hear the stamps on the passports. I take the passports. I start, how when you come through customs and you have like 2 phones in your bag? You definitely did it. And you don't know if you should walk too fast to get past, but that'll look suspicious. But if you walk too slow, then they're going to pull you over. So I'm with the kids, hoping they don't change their mind, going fast, going slow. And we get to the escalator to go up to the gates, and we start going up. And then Ayen's hand slips out of my hand. And as the escalator is going up, I look down, and she's freaking out. She's never seen steps move before. So I grab the boy on one hand, and I kind of go down the escalator and try to grab her, and she doesn't want to come with me because she's freaking from the moving steps. And I'm looking at passport control, and I'm like, oh yeah, this happens every day, kids. And I grab her on the other hand, and I go up to the steps. We go down to gate 32, and the mother's sitting there with her head between her knees praying. And I tap her on the shoulder, and she picks her head up, and she sees the children, and she understands that we're going to board the plane together and go to Israel. This picture was taken right before we boarded the plane. This picture was taken as we landed. Now, what's so powerful about this is the sign that says, "Welcome home, Olim." Welcome home. This is the first time she understood that she didn't just go to a better place, but she came home. And as a Jewish descendant to a Jewish mother, no matter how many generations down, she was welcomed back home to her home country. And this is the message that went through her every place she came. No matter what, if it was the taxi driver, if it was when she got her to that zoot, if it was the first time she went to the supermarket, they knew the story and they looked at her and they told her, "Bruchim habayim habayta," welcome home, achot, sister. And this is when she got her ID. They gave her as a olah 1,200 shekel. I explained to her how much it is in South Sudanese dinar in a country where you make $21 a month. And she's like, "Wow, there's so much money." I was like, "Just wait for you to go to the supermarket, get some milk and bread and butter." Over here is my daughter's, I guess, ruining Ayen, teaching her nail polishes. And my son teaching him what a bike is. And this is a picture from the last holiday. My whole family. And Fiat and her children. And for us, they were living at our home. And not just that, It was a good thing that we did to them, but I feel that what they did to our family is more than I could ever give to them. The blessing now that we have in our home, also between me and my wife, and also to my children, the blessing that we have because we're able to get over the tough stumbling blocks. The blessing by us giving to someone else is really getting so much more, so much more. And if you guys ask what happened to the second sister, Susie, so as I said, we can't talk about it now because we're basically over. So this is maybe next year, right, if you guys will have him back. But just so you should know, we never leave anyone behind. August 22nd, 2019, Susie and her 3 children landed in Israel, and thank you very much. Before I open to the floor to questions. Is the grandson answering the grandfather? I would say, before I open for the questions, I would just say maybe short messages. First message is, as you can see, I'm not just this hero guy that went and did something like Indiana Jones, like the newspapers wrote. I'm a very simple person. I did not plan on doing this. As you can see, I did not know how to do this. You guys are actually ahead of me because you just went through the crash course that I never did. So you guys, and really what it is, I'm a simple person, but I decided that I'll do my little part, and God did the rest. And my message to you, every single person in this room, in your personal life, whatever you're going through, you could do your little part, and you don't know the ripple effect, and God will never ask to you why you didn't accomplish something. God will say, why didn't you try? And I think the first message I came in when I came into this church, and this place of prayer, and I heard the ambition and what you're trying to do and how you're trying to change the way people connect to Israel, and I already see where it's going to go to, and that for me was also a very strong message. So I bless all of you to continue in that work and to succeed and to push on the message. And another message, of course, is to help another person. Doesn't matter where or when, and that'll help you so much more. And I'm full of prayer that together. And the third message, and maybe saying this message at this place, is that when Jews and Christians come together to work and do things together and to bring prophecy to fruition, not even reality will stand in front of them. And as you could see in this story, and I did not go into all the details, it was against reality. And right now these children are growing up in Israel, in regular schools, playing together with other children. And for me, just to see that is worth it to live just for those moments. And you guys will be able to also take part in happening and making this happen and be able to help us bring more families. Thank you very much. God bless you.